Good morning. Thank you for joining us. This is Stephanie Kenner, part of the Learning and Development team at my local aggregation. We've got a fantastic group of you that have joined us today for our construction finance webinar. I can see a lot of unfamiliar names, so thanks for joining us today. This webinar will run close to 1 hour. It is being recorded, so we're happy to share that recording with you if you would like to review the content afterwards. And you're also eligible for 1 CPD point today, so you just need to record that in your register with FBAA or MFAA. We would encourage any questions today, so as we go, if there's any previous challenges you've had or anything you're curious about, you'd like Glenn to clarify, you've got some questions, please put those in the Q&A section, and we will either answer them as we go or reserve a bit of time at the end to be able to do that. So let's get started. Firstly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Glenn Darcy.
Who's sitting here with a cold, by the way?
That's right. You can hear him in the background. Sorry about that. Welcome, Glenn.
Thanks, Steph.
So Glenn is our full-time mentor here. He has about 20 mentees at the moment, and he has had a long and varied experience in the mortgage broking industry. So he started off in the early years with Aussie. He's had his own brokerage. He would be considered, I think, a real expert in this space of construction finance. And we've run this webinar not only for our mentees, but for experienced brokers as well, because it is one area that, firstly, can be a little bit confusing to a lot of brokers. And I guess in part that is because it's quite a prolonged process compared to just doing one refinance or one purchase. And we're really going to discuss that in detail today. And secondly, I think for both the purchaser and the broker, construction finance can be stressful for a number of reasons because you've got so many third parties that you're dealing with. So Glenn's got a wealth of experience in this space that he's going to be sharing with you today. And I think in the recording and the slide deck, you'll be able to come away with some real specifics on how you can talk to your customers about the whole construction process and all of the figures. So today's agenda, what is going to be covered, we're going to be talking about the different types of construction packages. So for you to get very clear on the terminology when you're talking to builders and developers, and we'll be able to explore all of those. We'll talk about valuations, when they take place, what your part is in that, the typical types of drawdowns and part payments, and how you communicate that to your customer. And very importantly, your involvement with your client during the whole process. So with construction finance, it can take really a year, 18 months. It can be quite a long process. And it takes very good communication, not only with the client, but oftentimes with the builder, sometimes with the valuer. And you're really the central part in this whole process. So with that, I would like to welcome Glenn. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Steph. It's great to be here. I also see some familiar names, so thanks for you guys for coming on early this morning and for coming on again and listening to this once again, but also to the guys that are here for the first time. I'll apologise firstly for the croaky voice or the nasally voice and the occasional cough and splutter. I've been crook for a little bit, and but hopefully we'll get there. So please, I beg your patience there. But again, welcome, and we're going to go through a lot today. And I think first things we need to start with exactly what is a construction loan, and we'll talk about how they work and things like that in a moment. But from a broker's point of view, being really good at handling construction loans can really, I think, help separate yourself from your competitors. There are a lot of people who sit out in display villages, and some of you might already do this, and who don't really have a good understanding of what construction loans are all about. But really, the builder needs you to understand that. And if you're good at it, you'll also find that once your name will soon be spread around the place as someone who knows what they're talking about. And the other builders will actually come to you. The other sales guys in the area might even come and knock on your door, or call you and say, listen, got 10 minutes, come over here. I've got a scenario that I want to run by you. Steph alluded to this earlier, but construction loans are a very different creature. Certainly when you're comparing them to most other forms of lending. You've got to have a very good understanding of the time issues involved. They certainly do create more work. There's a lot of work involved with putting a construction deal together. Yes, they can take quite some time, depending on where you guys are. If you're in Melbourne, just as an example, where we are, there's land being sold now that, you can point to a cow in the field and go, there's my block. It's 12 or 18 months away from being ready, but the land is being sold. So we as brokers need to know how to handle that situation, because today's market is a varying one. And yes, that you might be lucky enough to deal with a construction loan that's ready to go right now. You're very fortunate if you are, but in the main, they can take quite a long time to come to fruition. Also, they can take a lot of time management skills for you to be able to handle the salespeople and the customer and the conveyancer and the valuer and the builder. It's a very big relationship exercise, this one, and those of you who know me know that I'm all about that. So managing the customer expectations, talking to them about things like, look, there's going to be long periods of inaction on your block. Hopefully, if some of you are already doing construction loans, you might have already heard of this before, where the customers might come running to you because you're the friendly face. The builders, after a while, sort of just become, I won't say the enemy, that's a bit unfair, but there's not a lot of communication going on between the builder and their customer, and the customer will run to you and go, oh, hey, Glenn, I've driven past the block 6 times this week and, no one's on site. Now, we may laugh at that, but it's a very real concern for people who are building for the first time. I would say a high percentage of construction deals right now, first homeowners buying something just in an area that they can afford. So if they've never built before, they don't know the problems, and they expect someone on site every day doing their thing, and it just doesn't work that way from a logistics point of view. So for us as brokers to be able to manage the expectation, let the clients know, hey guys, don't drive by every day. You're going to drive yourself nuts. There will be periods of inaction. Sometimes the brickies can't get on site, or they're not slated to be on site for a period of time. The framers might have gotten done early, or the weather's poor, or whatever it might be. We need to make sure that we as the brokers, as the professionals in this exercise, are making sure that our customers have a very clear expectation of what's going on. I read an article, Steph, a little while back. Well, when I say a little while back, probably 10 years ago. And some of you guys watching this might have heard of this article, where they're talking about life stress. Now, we're not talking mortgage stress here, but life stress is probably the number one, is people don't like speaking publicly. But not far off that are the stresses involved with a construction deal. People freak out through it because there might be the inactive period's the one that drives them nuts the most, or the builder's not ringing them every day with where they're at. And there are periods why the builder goes quiet. They might be waiting on council plans, etc., that need to be done, stamping, authorization, engineering, all of that. And while all that's getting done, the builder's not going to be ringing the clients every day going, hey, we're doing this today and we're doing that today. But the clients sometimes expect that. So we, as the professional in this issue, should be at the top of the tree there and explaining the whole thing, good and bad, so that the clients have a very clear understanding of what's going on. They can come to you as a sounding point, but again, you just need to remind them that these are the issues with construction deals. This is how they work. This is what's going to happen next. This is what's going to happen after that. And that way, you do become the expert, and the whole situation moves much more smoothly for them because you're the one who's told them what's going on.
That's right, Glenn. You know, what about when it's been raining continuously for days and days? The builder hasn't been on site,
Yep.
the frame's up,
Yep.
and the customer's worried about
the timber
damage
rotting
and the timber rotting.
Yes, and that's really common. It's certainly here in Melbourne anyway, guys. We have periods like that. Or land settlement happened today, contracts done, the customer expects that the builder will be on site tomorrow, and we get 3 weeks of rain. Well, 3 weeks of rain also means then the soil's got to dry out before they can even dig the pits for the electrical and the Telstra pits and all of that sort of stuff before the slab can go down. The soil's got to dry out. So it may sit there for 6 weeks and there's nothing going on. And I guarantee you the client will be on to you. Why is this not being done? Or they'll be on to the builder first, of course, and then they'll probably come to you. Oh, the builder's not telling us anything. What can we do? And you just need to remind them that, okay, without having a decent base to your block, the slab's not going to last all that long. They have a homeowner's warranty. They need to make sure everything is done correctly when everything is ready to be done correctly. And as long as you guys stay calm and explain it to them, this is normal, this is the way it's going to be, then again, everyone will be a little happier and, as I said earlier, a little less stressful. And that's the whole idea behind it. And if at the end of the whole deal they come to you and go, hey, thanks for that, thanks for managing our expectations, we're very happy with how it went in the end, they will, of course, then start referring more people your way, and you can ask for it too. So anyway, that's the theory behind all of that. So let's move on, Steph. Okay, house and land packages. Exactly what are they? Now, when we're talking to a builder, they will generally sell a house and land package as what they call a house and land package, which is clearly a house with some land attached to it, or vice versa. But there are house and land packages, and then there are house and land packages. But regardless of that, as you can see on the slide there, the land has to settle first. Now, whether you're buying the land separately from the land agent, as an example, or you're buying it through the builder, no matter what happens, the land has to settle first. So let's talk about that just a little bit. You could look at a block of land that has, 7 or 14-day finance clause. So how do we handle that? Or, most commonly, obviously, the customers are looking to build ASAP, and that's with everyone. Everyone wants to build well and truly in advance of when even it needs to be ready, really. So, firstly, in a situation like this, let's talk about a typical house and land package as you might see it on a more regular basis. Firstly, that they found some land they want, and let's just say, for the sake of the example, the land does have a 14-day finance clause, but it's not due to settle for quite some time, okay? So you might have a customer in front of you who goes, look, I like this house with, A, B, C, let's not mention any builders' names, but they haven't really spoken to them yet, but they've got to buy the land and they've got to get the land done now. Or they might have had an initial conversation with the builder and just gotten some really basic pricing. Nothing, set in concrete for their house yet, but this house is typically this much. Or they're in final discussions, but a contract is not ready yet, okay? So let's look at how that works just from if we take it one step further. If we're going to be looking at a situation like that, and in construction deals, and we'll cover this in much more detail a bit later, we'll skip through this slide quickly. Loans are typically drawn down in stages, and there's essentially 5 stages within a building contract, but we'll call it 6 stages if there is land involved, which typically there is, where the loan is drawn down in stages, and obviously then the payments during each stage go up accordingly to the amount that's been drawn down along the way. Interest is accrued each month, and then it's an interest-only loan typically while it's being built. With 95% of builders, that's very true. And then that turns to a principal and interest loan 30 days after certificate of occupancy has been issued. So it's very important to have an understanding of that too when you're just talking to people about how the payments work, okay? So firstly then, how do we go about packaging these things? Okay, firstly, typically we need to do a land loan. So let's say for the sake of the argument, we don't have yet a final building contract. Anything else, this is the way it's got to be. So if we do get a finance clause on the block of land, even though the block of land's 12 months away from settling, clearly we need to make sure we get the land loan first. So we do that. At the same time, and this is something I'd suggest you get your heads around, and there's a lot of people who can't quite just wrap their mind around this. If you know that the client is looking at a house worth roughly X dollars, okay, then it's a great idea. So at the same time you do the land loan, you put a separate loan together for the pre-approval for what we call the absorption of the land loan to build. Okay, so the first one here would be the land loan, followed by the absorption of the land loan to build. So let's call this a 175 grand land loan, 300 grand to build on it. We do 2 loans. Okay, now why would we do this? Oh, it creates extra work, land. Geez, why would we bother? Okay, here's a great question for you, and I hope none of you have had this problem, but if you have, I'd love to see a yes from you. How often may have done a land loan before, and then when you go back, well, 2 things could happen. One, you could lose the client down the road anyway when they're ready to build, because their builder might put them onto their broker, or conversely, they come back to you with, okay, we're ready to build now, and things have changed. They can't afford to buy the house. Now, this happens with fairly frightening regularity, and we as brokers have got to stop that. We've got to let the bank know right from the word go, this is what the people are looking to do.
So the serviceability didn't work? Absolutely,
yes. So in this case, we want to make sure it does. And we can tell the client right now, okay, I know you're looking at this house for 300, can't quite manage that. If you can bring it down to 275, we're about there. We go to the bank right now, so the bank also has a clear understanding of what's going on, so that when we go back later, either to take that pre-approval and turn it into an unconditional, everyone's happy, everyone knows what's going on, the hard work's done, builder's satisfied, you're satisfied, the clients are satisfied. If we get to a situation to where we hopefully never get to the point where we're telling a client 6 months from now that they can't buy the house they want, under the assumption their personal circumstances haven't changed. Look, there's all sorts of conversations about that. But if we can do it up front, then do it up front. Everyone's happy. The clients know what they can spend. The builder knows what the client can spend. The lender knows what they can afford. And you've locked your client in. They're your client. And they're not going anywhere unless you mismanage a relationship. But we're all professionals here. Let's assume that doesn't happen. So in this situation, that's the way to go. And if you can possibly manage that, it'll save you a lot of time later, save your clients a lot of stress, and it will also help build your relationship with the builder. One final point on that. There's nothing better, I can tell you from personal experience, guys, that if you follow this and then you can go into the builder's sales guy and say, hey, John, listen, I've just done a pre-approval for Bob and Betty. I know that the land's 3 to 6 months away from settling, but I've got them pre-approved for a $300,000 build. He will think you are God. They'll be so happy because you can say to them, hey, listen, they can buy this house, take their deposit, get them moving on that. We'd love to have the contract ready when the land is ready to settle, if not prior to, so that you guys can start building as soon as possible. Everyone wins if you follow the right path here. Okay, so hopefully that all makes sense.
The other reason, Glenn, you would have seen it, I've certainly seen it, is funds to complete. So without that pre-approval, the broker might have done a max LVR on the land.
Yep.
And didn't do a pre-approval for the whole lot with the absorption.
Yep.
And then the house and land, we know that, there's LMI and all of those things involved, but let's just say that particular lender that they placed the land with would only go up to 90.
Yep.
And the customer didn't have funds to complete.
Well, that's a great question. Great point. Sorry, Steph. That's fairly common too, and I think if you are able to control that situation right from the word go, at least then you can tell your clients, hey guys, you're $5 grand short or you're 10 grand short on the construction stage. Now they may think because they've got 90% put aside for the land that that's enough. Now in some cases that's true, but in the main it's not. And we've also got to be careful, without talking banks here right now, which bank might get this, because some banks will double dip you on the LMI, some will absorb the first lot of LMI into the second. That's another conversation for another day. However, if you can manage that and you're doing it up front, then everyone knows what's going on. And if the clients have to wait a little bit to build, to save more money, or go to mum and dad, or sell a car, or sell something else, that's really great. One other thing I want to bring up just quickly. There's a question on the screen that I want to answer straight away. So Jing, I'd like to thank you for this question. The question being, but the pre-approval is only valid for 90 days. What happens if they're not ready to build until 6 months later? Great point. Typically speaking, yes, you might have to redo the pre-approval again after 90 days. But guess what? So what? That just means you're just doing a little bit of extra paperwork and refreshing everything, but at least you're still controlling the situation and keeping the clients under your wing. You've even sometimes got to take a punt that maybe if the land's 12 months away, that's a curly one. Do you let the clients walk for 6 months and follow up 6 months later, or do you wait and hope that you don't lose them? Do you do a pre-approval now knowing you might have to do that 3 more times? That's a conversation for another day. Some people would agree to doing that, some would not. But if we know the land's 6 months away and you've only got to do one more pre-approval, then just do one more pre-approval. It's also not a bad way maybe to just make sure the clients haven't changed their own personal circumstances, change jobs, something like that. Because obviously, as we know, that can be a loan killer. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But Jing, thanks for that question. It's a great question.
Yeah, I think even, Glenn, if you don't process that pre-approval, your due diligence in just checking in with the client to make sure that no circumstances have changed, so that if there's any alarm bells ringing, at least you've got some time to go to plan B.
That's right. I think with plan B is a great way to look at it, is that the clients sometimes believe that, we got pre-approved with you 3 months ago, that means we're pre-approved forever, which is not the case, as you all know. But they think then they can change jobs or go to Harvey Norman and spend 40 grand on bedroom furnishings and TVs and stuff like that, which might kill the deal off. I've had that happen, and I'm happy to share that story with you guys another day, or individually if you want. That was a day that I don't ever want to have happen again. But yes, you're right, Steph. I think we have to just keep our finger on our clients and make sure they're happy. Anyway, let's keep moving on. So, continuing in the discussion on the house and land just for the moment, let's just say, for the sake of the argument, you are lucky enough to either be buying the house and land package directly off the builder, who might have been sitting on the land for a while, and they are already with a fixed price contract. Look, that's just one single deal, nice and easy. They're the ones we all would love to have. They're very few and far between. The only real question there would be is, how far away is land settlement? So they could have a fixed price contract, but land is still 6 months away. Well, then the previous rules already apply. But you don't have to do 2 loans in this case. You just get the pre-approval for one, or go and get an unconditional if we do have a fixed price contract. If land is 6 months away, we'll let the lender know that that's the case. If we need to review it down the track, we do. That depends on the lender, really. So, as an addition to that, so here's just an extra arm for that. So let's assume already that the customers might already own the block. Now, this is not that common, but it does come up from time to time. They might have bought you might be one of those lucky ones who the customers bought the block 6 months ago, and they might have dealt with another broker who only just did the land loan for them and did not do anything to do with construction. And he's now lost them. If they come to you, you guys are the mortgage professionals here. Hopefully then, one, if you're on the other side of it, you didn't lose them. But if they've come to you, they've probably walked away from their lender or their broker or their bank. So if they've already got if they already own the block, it's 2 questions really. One, are we refinancing this piece of land, or do they own it fully? Okay, either way, we're just looking at one loan of 475 grand. Hopefully that makes sense. That's a nice simple one. They're the ones that we love. They're the ones that we want, but they're not the ones that we get that often. If you are getting some of these, congratulations. It doesn't happen very often in this day and age, certainly not in Melbourne anyway. For those of you around the country, if you're having some of these come up to you, fantastic. Love the old refi. We'll talk a little bit more about refinancing a block to build in just a bit. So this brings me to valuations. Now, most of you hopefully are aware that there's three kinds of valuations. The first one's a computer-based val. There's all sorts of terms for it, but that's just the term I'll use for the sake of the argument. They don't go and inspect it. They just take it off a computer-based or a desktop val. Secondly is curbside, to where they literally will just run out and have a quick look, drive past. They don't really even get out of the car. And the final one is a full val. Now, when we're talking construction stuff, 99.999% of the time they will do a full valuation. Now, that doesn't mean they get into the house that hasn't been built yet, of course, but they look at it on what's called an as-if complete basis. So it's your role then to provide, obviously, a copy of the land contract plus the fully completed construction contract, fully signed off by all parties, to the valuer so that they can do their job, and hopefully it values up at what we need. Now, we're not going to talk about low vals today. That can be another conversation for another day, perhaps. It is something that happens from time to time, unfortunately. But for the sake of the argument, this is how the valuations run, okay? So let's have a bit of an overview, just as we move forward, on how it works, how the funding is used, how it's drawn down. Okay, so typically speaking, we'll have an initial deposit of 5%. Now we're talking house and land or construction just for the moment. This is purely just for the construction component. Okay, we've put the land aside just for a moment. So typically the builder's going to want 5% deposit. Now normally they'll say, I'll take $1,000 now and the balance of 5% when you sign the contract. So there are then 5 other distinct stages. Firstly, the first stage, we'll call that the slab stage. That's typically, now the numbers do vary from state to state, and sometimes the builders will vary it, and master builders versus the HIA is slightly different as well. I'm just giving you a guideline here, guys, so please just allow for that. So typically the slab stage is 20% of the remaining contract. The second stage is the slab stage. That's typically about 30. Then there's the lockup, which is the windows and the brickwork and all that sort of stuff, doors. So the house is locked up. The fourth stage is what they call the final stage, which is all the internal stuff. So all of the final wiring is done, the plaster work's all done, all the internals are done. And then they have the fit out, which is the final stage, which is basically the connection of the wiring, turning the power on, all the appliances go in, painting's done, it's all done, right? So at the completion of that, hopefully that all adds up to 100%, including the 5%. And then when the valuer is reviewing it, later on, they'll also look at these stages and to make sure that the value behind these stages is what's being requested by the builder. And provided that all happens, we're all good, then when that's all done, the certificate of occupancy is issued and we're ready to move in. So that's the real exciting stage. So let's keep moving. So with the repayments, now this is actually probably the number one question that we get from the clients, because they really have no idea how this next stage works. Okay, so many customers think of really one of two things. Firstly, and this is not common anymore, but there was a time when this was done, where no repayments at all are required to the builder until the house is done. Now, for those of you who might be watching today that have been around quite a while, might remember that Henley gave that a shot for a while, and there's a number of other builders out there who tried it for a while, and there's a number of other builders who are no longer around who thought that was their way of separating themselves, but their cash flow or lack of cash flow absolutely killed them and forced them out of business. Just briefly, I was involved pretty closely with some people from a company called Marwood Homes. Marwood were based out in the western suburbs of Melbourne for a little while, and they actually built a really nice home, Steph. It was a really nice home that they built, but their business model was just this. Now, I remember I used to go there every week just to go and do my thing and go and hang out with the staff and talk to the customers as they came in. And I showed up one day to their offices, and the gates were shut. Locks were up. They were gone. They were done, and there was no warning, no nothing to their clientele. And that was purely because of the cash flow. Now, I was lucky enough. I knew someone who worked inside, who was also a personal friend. So I chased her down, and she goes, "Oh, I can't really tell you much, but we're out of business. We don't have any cash anymore. We can't build homes and can't pay the tradies, etc., etc." So if you come across that, consider yourself fortunate. Don't talk the clients out of it by any stretch of the imagination, but you might also want to do some due diligence on the builder that they're contemplating building with, just so they don't get 2/3 of the way through and all of a sudden the work can't get done because they've gone down the drain. However, if someone's doing a special, a big builder, a Henley or a Simmons or a Metricon or someone like that, are doing a short special for 50 homes, hey, that's great. They're big enough to handle that. If you've got a customer doing that, jump all over it. Let them know that it's not a bad thing in case they ask. However, typically, when we're moving forward, as I said, it's not the case at all with that one. Typically, though, repayments are interest only and on the amount accrued, as in drawn down each month. So the balance changes with each stage. So we're going to show you this table in a second, but typically then the initial deposit, as I said earlier, is 5% paid to the builder. Now in this case, leaving $285,000 to be paid to the builder if they're looking at $300,000. So as we move forward from that, hopefully that makes sense, but the most common one now is they're paying by stages, and that doesn't hurt too much. We'll show you on a table in a minute how that does work. So we're going to use this example for everyone, and hopefully this makes sense. We've rejigged this page a little bit just to make it a little easier to see. So typically, here we go. If we're talking about a normal construction loan, okay, so house and land package, all done in one hit. We've absorbed the land maybe into the construction stage. So now we're in the final stages. The house is getting built. So first things first, okay. When the land loan, let's say it's $175,000 land loan. Now I've taken the interest only repayments. I can't remember what we did on the interest rate on this, but these are just a guideline, okay.
I think it was around 4.
About 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Please don't out there double check these numbers. They're just a bit of a guideline, okay. But this is what you can show your clients. Now, this is really important for the clients who either have another mortgage already or are renting. Now, the renting part is a really big thing here. A lot of people that are renting, even though they might want to go and build a house, Steph, they just think they can't afford it. They can't afford the repayments of everything that's plus the rent.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to show you right now is how easy it can be. It gets a little heavy towards the end with price, obviously, because there's more money being spent. But if you can explain to your clients, hey, listen, this is how it works. Can you manage that? Can you manage that? Can you manage this next stage? Yes, the last couple of stages might hurt a little bit, but these last 2 stages might happen pretty quickly anyway, and you've got a bit of time to save your money. Okay, so we're just going to walk you through this so that you can see a way that certainly I had it taught to me and how I used to explain it to my clients as well. This is just a super way just to give them an idea of what goes on and how they're going to be affected and what the costs are going to be. So the first stage is this one, followed by the second stage. Okay, so that's the slab stage. Now remembering that with the slab stage, it's 20% of the contracted price, which in this case is $300,000. So what we do is we look at $175,000, which is the land component, plus we're adding that extra $60,000 there, as you can see, which is that 20% of the 300. taking the total balance for that particular stage to $235,000, and the interest-only repayments on that are $790. Now, one thing I'd like to actually try and make clear here, if you don't quite explain this the right way, the clients might think this is just monthly, and stage 2 is the next month, and stage 3 is the next month, and stage 4 is the next month. So you also need to explain to them, oh no, stage 1 can take a while. The frame can happen generally pretty quickly, but the lockup might take 8 weeks, 10 weeks. The fit out might take 4 or 5 weeks. The final might take a week, and then the internal fit out and the total final part, the appliances, it might only take another week or two. The only way that you can explain it to them makes any sense is what I'm trying to show you here. You're painting a slightly negative picture, but you need to be honest with them and say this is not a monthly thing, but the repayments per month are what I'm going to show you. That could be a 6-week thing, it could be an 8-week thing, it might roll over twice, but it just keeps growing. Anyway, hopefully that's all clear. So the second stage, we can churn through this a little bit now. So we're talking about 30% based on the numbers earlier. So that's the current balance, which was 235 plus another 90. That then takes the repayment for that particular stage to 1,090. Then we move up to the third stage, which is again 20%, so another 60 grand on top of that, taking the balance to 385, and the repayment, as you can see there, is 1292. Fourth stage, another 15%, so we're now up at $430,000. Repayments are reflected there. The fifth stage, final stage, is the final 10%. So now we're up at the loan amount that we're looking for, 460 overall, and there's your repayments for interest only for that final stage. Now remember this, and this is something that people will ask you, when do the repayments change? It's a very common question. People think it's a day after, some people just don't know. So typically 30 days after the certificate of occupancy has been issued, which should be at the completion of stage 5 or very closely thereafter, the loan's going to revert to full principal interest repayments unless you set up otherwise, but in our current market, we know that that's damn near impossible to do. So it reverts to full P&I, and in this example, as you can see, the figure there would be 2275. Now, when you show them that final figure, you might see some eyes spinning in the back of their heads a little bit, but remind them, hey guys, you'll be out of the house by then. You won't be renting anymore. You might be paying less on this than you were on rent. And then that might dawn on them, hey, this is great, I can handle that. So just be gentle through this stage, just explain it all to them in a nice, easy way. But remember, 30 days after the certificate of occupancy is issued, the loan will revert back. The first repayment's not expected really until that 30 days, so a month after the loan changes, unless you're on fortnightly, and it might be the next fortnight after that. Okay, so really that's all that is on that. Very important, please, spend a bit of time on this table. I love this table. It shows people a lot. It's a fantastic way to give them an understanding of what their repayments are going to be and what their debt expectation is going to be as they move forward. Certainly those first three, the land loan, stage 1, stage 2, most people go, yep, I can handle that. And then you can start to see the colour in their face change a little bit when it gets down towards the end. But they still can manage it generally. You'll find that, particularly if they're renting, they know that they're going to move from house, that rental property to their own home. They're pretty excited anyway. If they're moving away from mum and dad's, it's a bit different because they probably haven't had any debt or, rental repayments or things like that to deal with in the past. And if they're moving from another home, that's another conversation. But essentially, if they're moving from home A, it's theirs and they're renting it, they might be renting that out to someone else and they're moving into this. Well, that's great too. That means that they can start renting that out and earning some income from that other property.
That's really key, Glenn, because this conversation right here, because the lender is not taking into consideration the repayment at stage 4 and 5 and the combination of their rent.
That's right.
It's not in their serviceability.
No.
So really, it's only you, the broker, that needs, that has the responsibility of walking the client through these stages and making sure the client's comfortable with
Absolutely.
it. And if they need some contingencies,
Yep.
you know, they're looking towards their dream home, this is really what they want to do. But as they're getting down to stage 4 and 5, if they think they're going to be a little bit tight,
Yep.
they need to have a bit of a plan.
Yep.
Like you were saying, selling off a few assets, getting a bit of help from someone just to get through that stage.
Yep.
So they're not put into any sort of hardship situation.
Yep.
Because the lender is not looking at that total scenario that includes their rent.
No, they're not. But yes, you're right, Steph, but the customer does.
Yeah.
So we as brokers need to show them that big picture. I can't highlight this table enough. It will win you business, right from the word go, because people want to know this stuff. And because you've got the ability to show it to them, and someone else may not, that separates you from the crowd again, and again, makes you the expert. And if it means that you might lose the odd client for the moment because they can see this and generally have a bit of a heart attack over the cost of it, hey, guess what? You've still done the right thing by them. You still have the right to go back to them and say, hey, listen, you know, I've thought about this. Have you thought about it? What have you done about it? Have you gone to mum and dad, or do you think, you know, you need to look at a lesser house? That kind of conversation can come up after you've shown them this table. Most people, certainly from my experience, have either gone one of two ways. They've either gone, no, I can't do it, or yes, I can, which is generally the most common because they're pretty motivated to go and build their own home. Or they realise maybe that, you know, they have to look at a lesser home and that you can do this with all kinds of numbers. You just have to be willing to sit there with the calculator, show them how it works, make them feel comfortable about their decision, and then let them say, yes, we're ready to rock and roll, we understand, let's go. And then again, you can walk them into the builder and go, right, these guys are fully informed as to what's going down. They know exactly what's happening. Here they are, sit them down. They're ready to buy a house right now. And that's what the sales agent wants to hear. They don't want to hear anything else. It's all fluff. They just want to know that these guys can do this loan, and most importantly, they can afford it and they're motivated to do it. And everything will move along very smoothly after that.
Glenn, let's spend a moment while we give people a little bit of time to send any additional questions through. You touched on this earlier, and this is really the relationship with the client. And I think construction loans, as well as other types of loans, let's say in the non-conforming space.
Yeah.
Whenever we take a client through a loan like this, that's a prolonged period and at times can be a little bit confusing or even stressful, these are the clients that if you manage this relationship really well and you keep them informed at every single step on the way,
yeah,
and you've solved a big challenge for them.
Yep.
This is the client that is going to be extremely loyal to you and refer other clients.
Look, I think, again, being different is what it's all about, and having the knowledge to win the client over, do the right thing by them, be professional at every stage. And if you do the right thing by them, yeah, you'll always earn the right to go back to them and ask for a referral. Or, hey, the phone might just call cold. And that's wonderful. There's nothing better than that. Those of you who have been around for a little while may have had that happen to them. And please, I know that you've got to tell me that that's one of the best things that can happen where you get a phone call out of nowhere. You know, I'm looking at, there's a name here I know a little bit, Ben Dennis. And, you know, if I rang Ben and out of the blue and I said, hey, Ben, I'm a friend of Jim's who you looked after 6 months ago, and he told me I have to deal with you. You know, you can't tell me, Ben, you wouldn't get excited by that. Otherwise, I will check you for a heartbeat. There's nothing better as a broker myself. You know, I build my business on that. And I fervently believe that if you can do the right thing by the clients, they'll be clients for life. I'm known for that term. I apologise for those of you who've heard that 100 times about me, but I fervently believe in that. And if you can do the right thing by them, then that's great. I think if we take that one step further, just sticking to the construction scenario for a minute, something I haven't covered yet, and I haven't done it in this webinar, but I'll cover it now. There are so many parties involved in a construction deal that it's not just about you and your clientele. Really, if we do this in no particular order, yes, there's your clientele, your client, the person who's directly buying the house and or the land. There's the land agent. There's the builder. There's the conveyancer that you might have ready to hand your clients to. There could be the solicitor for the land agent that you can talk to as well. There may be a real estate agent rather than a land agent involved. So just quickly, if you are able to talk to all of those people, all of them, along the way, then there's 4 or 5 other parties that if you're keeping them all in the loop with this one situation, they will really love you. It's not that common that brokers go out and talk to the conveyancers for the other side as well. There's nothing wrong with calling the solicitor for the developer. They may not care too much, but the fact is, or send him an email, send him a letter, say, hey, listen, I'm acting on behalf of Bob and Betty Smith. Just want to let you know that the block of land at lot such and such has been unconditionally approved. We look forward to settlement happening smoothly, something like that. That gives you the right then to talk to them further down the track. And if you're dealing with one particular land agent in one particular development area, that solicitor is going to get to know your name because you might be doing 10 or 20 deals or 30 deals over the next few months there, and they'll get to know you. So then it's not hard for you to jump on the phone. You might actually be talking to one person in that office and say, hey, let's catch up for coffee and have a chat. And all of a sudden, maybe you've got a new referral partner in your pocket, so to speak. It's not the right terminology, but that's what I'm looking for. But please spend the time and look at all interested parties in this deal. Not just the builder, not just the land agent. Look at all of them, communicate with them, talk to them a lot, keep them up to speed with everything that's going on, and off we go from there. So that, again, you'll be building your business without really even knowing it, without going out of your way to do it. You're just keeping everyone in the loop. So that's something, please, it's something I really believe in. And if you can build a bit of a program, or if you need my help to give you a program, I can give you something that will enable you to do that with a minimum of fuss. And off you go from there. And all of a sudden the phone will just ring itself off the hook. And the beautiful behind thing with the builders situation anyway is you want the builders from across the street to be coming across, or from around the corner to come across, or to call you and say, hey, listen, can you come into the office, in an hour? I've got some people coming in. That means you've done your job well and you've got a good reputation. And that's what we're trying to make happen here.
Yeah.
So some questions.
Ben's just made a comment, Glenn, which is when the 14-day finance clause exists or it doesn't, when there's just dirt on the side of a hill, there's nothing to vow. There's nothing to do a valuation on.
Yeah, it's a great point. Ben, that's a super question, and it does come up a lot. You say the dirt on the side of a hill. I say that's where the cow's standing over there about 400 metres away. The value, as some of you are probably aware of this, and I'm sure you are too, Ben, you've been around a bit. In a situation like that, for those of you who don't know, the valuation will be done on the contract of sale, or potentially a curbside val. Yes, because there is no land cut up, there's no roads, there's no nothing. They will value it pretty much on the contract of sale. And that's the only way that can work. Yes, even if the block of land's 12 months away, and I agree with another comment here saying that, why would they then sell the block of land subject to finance if the land's 15 months or 18 months away? That's a conversation for the developers and their legal parties, but we don't have the power to change any of that. So if you are coming across that situation where the land is that far away from settling, but you need an unconditional approval in order for them to buy the block, hey, listen, you either do it or you don't. If you do it, okay, it's done. If you don't do it and you take a punt to let them go unconditional in the hope that they can still afford to do what they want to do 15 months from now, then it's a big risk. And I'm a little risk averse, and I think that where we can take the client and we can make them our client, remember guys, once they've signed with you, they're your client. And unless you do something stupid, like forget about them, then they won't go anywhere. If you look after them, they'll stay yours. If you said to a client who came to you and said, listen, we've got a 7-day finance clause. Yes, it is that cow on the as far as the eye can see away. We don't really see the need to get our finance approved right now. And if you then said to them, okay, off you go, guys, look, I'll catch you in 12 months, who knows what's going to happen? They could have changed jobs. They could have, there could have been a baby come into the family. So one party's now not working that might have needed the money to make that fall into place. They come in, they meet someone else who introduces them to another broker, and you've lost them. So bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, basically meaning that if you've got the client in front of you and if you can tie them in somehow or other, then you tie them in. Whether that's the right thing to do or not, I believe it is, because at least and you're telling them, yes, you can definitely afford this land loan. And yes, according to one of my earlier slides, yes, you can look at building on it too, based on today's prices. You've got them, and in their mind, they're with you, they're not going anywhere. So hopefully, that all clears up.
Bob's asking, do all lenders conduct a new valuation based on completion before settlement?
Great question, Bob. More often than not, no. What they'll do is they'll do the valuation based on the land and the construction component together, whenever that may be. They won't go out just prior to settlement and review it. One, because there's no house sitting on the ground, if that's a question you're asking me. They will take it on the land and the construction contract at the time of application. Now that's true really of all mortgages. The lenders will look at things at time of application. So hopefully that clears that a little bit.
That actually may mean, Glenn, at the certificate of occupancy stage.
Bob, if you're listening, is just hit me with a yes if you think that's really if that's what you're asking. That'd be great. While I'm waiting for Bob to come in, we've got one more.
Yep. Joe has asked, does the lender notify you when at each stage the drawdown has been done?
More often than not, yes. What'll typically happen is that the builder will go to the customer with an invoice, and the invoice, the customer will then might have a form from the bank. I'll just use ANZ as an example, if I may here, guys. ANZ provide 5 drawdown forms that have to be filled out by the customer. They put the invoice from the builder with that, send it off to the bank. The bank won't necessarily come to us as brokers to say that it's been drawn down, but you might see it in next month's commission statement because the trail changes. However, what I would say there is that hopefully you're already on that because you're talking to your clients on a regular basis and you're not relying on the bank giving you information. You've already found that information out before the bank doesn't tell you. So, Joe, I hope that clears that up for you. If you're proactive, you'll win every time.
And Glenn, is that valuation cost outside of the loan? Is that a cost that the customer needs to be prepared for?
Good question. Some banks will include in their fee structure 5 drawdowns. Yep. Some will just have one flat fee. Some won't charge anything. They don't charge post, so you can build it into the loan amount. Okay.
Yeah.
So Bob's come back with when the certificate of occupancy is issued, will the bank revalue? No, is the answer to that. The valuation's been done, Bob. They won't go out to make sure the house is actually on the ground. That's typical of what goes on with the 5 stages. When that final stage, so the 5th stage is done, they won't revalue the whole project. What they're doing is just to make sure the project is complete. And when the final dollars are spent, then obviously the bank walks away from the deal as such. They don't have any day-to-day dealings with it anymore other than receiving the payments from the client.
Yeah, and the certificate of occupancy is actually proving that the property is habitable.
That's right.
And finished.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Whether it's worth what they paid for it, it might have gone up in value, it may have gone down in value. And we can talk valuations if you want another day. I'd love to maybe do another, maybe a quick thought 30-minute one on this, but if you've got questions, you're welcome to ask me or email me with that stuff, because there are some peculiarities that can go on with valuations through building, not often, but from time to time.
Great. 2 more quick questions before we finish up, Glenn.
Yep.
Firstly, just in regard to that certificate of occupancy, have you seen many issues with landscaping not being complete?
Oh boy, yeah. It depends a little bit. Some builders will include basic landscaping in their contract, and some will not. If the basic landscaping needs to be included or has been included, it might just be, the rolled turf on the front or rolled turf in the back, or that spray-on green seed that they have these days. Or it might be something else that might be in the contract. If it's in the contract, it's got to be done. The home will be valued accordingly. And of course, the C of O cannot be issued until all of that is done. I've seen other issues where you've just got a house surrounded by mud, and then the clients want, go back to the builder, can you do this for us? No, we're finished. Or they ask for more money to do it themselves against the home. Let's say they're at 95% already, and they need another 30 grand to finish the landscaping. Unfortunately, in that situation, the answer is no. They can have to do it themselves and do it the hard way. You see a bit of that from time to time, but most builders these days will have something just to help separate themselves in the market, because that's an extremely competitive market. So they may see you on price and price and price, but if you walk in and go, yep, but I want to do that, now they may say we don't do it, and that's fine. But you find another builder who say, yep, we can do the back landscaping, we have to put in trees. Sometimes you'll find there'll be rules to the actual area where they've got to put in a certain amount of stuff. The area that I live in, every block of land had to have these horrible, spiky, bushy things that hopefully some of you are already rolling your eyes at. Well, I've got a pierced eardrum thanks to one of those, and I hate them. And they're almost impossible to dig out of the ground, and you can't kill them.
You're not allowed to dig them out.
No. Well, yeah, we're only just talking between you and I now, Steph. Those sorts of things, but they were part of that subdivision, needed to have a certain amount of planting of certain kinds, of certain types. Now, that's up to the builder. They will do that as part of that. But if they don't include it in their standard contract, that's part of a council thing. But landscaping's, a whole other issue, really.
Okay, one last question, and this is to do with any variations post-contract. How do you deal with that? Okay,
that's a super question. It's a question that will come up. A lot of people will say, okay, I'm going to pay, bottom dollar to get the house built. And then they get halfway through and then they realise, I want to change the paintwork, I want to change the tiles, or I want to change the carpet to a better standard of carpet and things like that. Now, for those of you who've done this before, I apologise. I'm just going to go really simple for a second. Let's say we're talking with ABC builders. Once you sign your contract with ABC builders, they will typically run you through what they call a colour selection stage. Now, colour selection means just that. Paintwork colours, tile types, carpeting, etc. Taps, light fittings, switches on the for the electrics, all of that. They'll show you through. You'll be able to select everything you want for the house. They will have a standard price level range, which might be included in the lower price level package. Then there'll be a more substantial range, better quality carpets, etc., better quality tiles at a price level range, and then they might have a supreme or executive level at another price level range. If you turn around and say pick the cheapest one, just for the sake of the argument, or your client does, excuse me, and they sign the contract for that, halfway through, even if the work hasn't been done yet, halfway through the build, they change their mind and they want to go up to the higher level, or they just want to change a couple of things. We found some other taps that we like instead, etc., etc. It's not part of their standard range. That becomes what's called a post-contract variation. For those of you watching today who have had to deal with post-contract variations, I apologise profusely because I'm sure you have wanted to go home and cry when that's been done. Post-contract variations are not included in the contract. So as an example, if we're talking about a 95% LVR deal, they've got to be able to pay for those post-contract variations out of their own pocket. There is no discussion on that. If we're talking a lower LVR and there's room to move, we can go back to the bank and ask for more money, not a problem. But if not, they need to pay for it out of their own pocket. And that's unfortunately the way that works. So hopefully that clears that up. Post-contract variations are a bit of a pain. And that's also why it's always a great idea before Steph gives me the hook. if you're talking to people that are thinking about that, again, be proactive, talk up front, tell them about that. Tell them about post-contract variations, what they are, how it works. Talk to them about what they want so that they're clear with the builder about what they want. Just because they see it in a display home, and this is the final thing I'll say, and I'm sure all of you will get this completely. I've got Steph nodding at me profusely right here. They walk into a display home. It's a display home. It's meant to get, the second you walk through the door, if you've not uttered wow, then they haven't built the right kind of display home. Most of the bigger builders, I can't speak for the small guys, but the bigger guys want you to walk in and go, oh my God, look at this. I've got to have this. Then they walk into the sales guy. How do I have this home? And he's expertly trained to say, this one's 200,000. And they think everything I see in there is 200,000. Then all of a sudden he'll go, that's for the basics. So what did you want different? I want it exactly as it is right next door right now with everything, pergola and the spa and the decking and the best of everything. Oh, well, that's 400,000. And they'll generally just walk out pretty dumbfounded. So if you can talk to your clients about that, prepare them for that, let them know that that's what goes on, and make sure they're clear with the builder right from the word go about what they want done in the house, not just stock standard. I want this and I want this and I want this. Let them price it for him up front. Then we don't have a post-contract variation issue. And also we'll get a better valuation for the property too, unless they're putting in things that don't really add real value, like gold taps and stuff. But over and above that, if you can manage that, everything should go fairly smoothly.
Education is key,
yep.
Glenn, definitely. Fantastic, thank you. Glenn, as he mentioned earlier, is very happy to talk to you. So whether you're one of our brokers or not
yep.
one of our brokers, feel free to contact Glenn directly if you're looking to get some feedback on construction or anything else. There's Glenn's email address, glenn@mylocalbroker.com.au, and there's the 1300 number. So feel free to connect with us. If you've got any other inquiries, if you're not on board with us and you'd like to be connected with a BDM, you can also shoot that through to Glenn.
Yep.
And at this point, we'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. We'll be on the line just for a couple of minutes now if there's any last comments you wish to make, and if today was valuable and you'd like another session that was focusing more on a different part of construction, leave those comments with us, and we thank you very much. And thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Steph, and thanks everyone for taking the time.
It's been a great session. I certainly learned a lot today. Bye-bye.